reluctantly voted for Donald Trump.
In the Middle East and said he was a president of peace. It was a lie, a deception.
Prepare for the Pearl Harbor event. Donald Trump is a war criminal to the use of American nuclear weapons.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into a situation that really, it demands our absolute attention. The escalating tensions between Israel and Iran.
It really does.
Yeah.
And this isn't just about, geopolitical maneuvers on some distant chessboard.
Exactly. It feels much closer, much more personal. It's about fundamental promises, profound betrayals, and frankly, the terrifying prospect of unprecedented global consequences, things that could genuinely reshape our world.
That's not an exaggeration, unfortunately.
So our mission in this deep dive, as always, is to try and cut through the relentless noise of the daily headlines. We want to extract the most vital nuggets of insight.
And we've got a really diverse stack of sources to draw from.
We do. Breaking news from, the big international outlets, CNN, BBC, USA Today, the ones you'd expect.
But also, and this is crucial, critical, sometimes deeply personal analysis from figures like Scott Ritter.
Yes, his perspective is, it's central to understanding a key part of this story. And we also have crucial insights from regional media, too.
Right, trying to get that multifaceted view.
Right. We're going to try and reveal the hidden layers of this conflict and the profound warnings from those who seem to understand the stakes intimately. It's a story that I think demands our attention, not just for the geopolitics, but for the stark warnings it carries for all of us.
And what's truly illuminating, I find, is how these various pieces of information, when you put them together, when you synthesize them, they paint this chillingly comprehensive picture of escalation.
It's like connecting the dots.
Exactly. They reveal the deeply interwoven nature of rhetoric and action and reaction in the Middle East. It's a cycle.
So we're going to examine the unfolding military actions, the often desperate diplomatic efforts.
And perhaps most importantly, the raw human impact of this intensifying conflict, giving you, hopefully, a view that dives far beyond just the surface headlines.
Okay, so to really understand the heart of this unfolding crisis, let's maybe cast our minds back a bit to a political landscape that many of you listening will remember vividly.
The Trump campaign promises.
Right. During his campaign, Donald Trump articulated a very, very clear promise. Bring peace to the Middle East and, critically, avoid getting the United States tangled up in these costly, seemingly endless foreign wars.
That was a huge part of his appeal.
It wasn't just a minor point, was it? It was a central pillar. It resonated deeply with a significant segment of the population. Voters, sure, but also many veterans, anti-war advocates, people who were just utterly exhausted.
After 2 decades of conflict, they saw his words as maybe a genuine path to disengagement, a more peaceful American foreign policy.
It felt like a breath of fresh air to many, a real shift from the interventionist tendencies they'd grown used to, perhaps even cynical about.
But then, the contradiction.
Yes. Almost immediately, it seems, a profound contradiction began to emerge. Just recently, Trump announced what he called a 2-week window for diplomacy with Iran.
Suggesting a pause, right? A chance for talks before any military action.
That was the implication, yes. A pause, a chance for dialogue. But the reality on the ground during this supposed diplomatic window, it was starkly, disturbingly different.
And the airstrikes didn't stop.
Not at all. Israeli airstrikes on Iranian targets continued relentlessly. Without pause, without any sign of de-escalation. This wasn't subtle. It was a glaring display of ongoing aggression.
Which immediately makes you ask,
how do we reconcile this? A stated commitment to peace, to diplomacy, a promise that earned him so much support with continuous, undeniable military aggression from a very close ally.
What does that tell you about the real intentions? Or the actual leverage the person making the promise even have? Or maybe doesn't have?
Or chooses not to use.
Precisely. And this glaring discrepancy, this is exactly where the voice of Scott Ritter comes in.
Former Marine Corps intelligence officer, UN weapons inspector, a notable figure.
Yes, and his voice resonates with, it's more than frustration, it's outright outrage. Ritter is someone who, for many, especially those who perhaps voted for Trump based on that non-interventionist talk.
He was seen as a trusted voice by some in that camp.
Exactly. And his analysis of these events, it doesn't just critique policy, it reveals this deep sense of personal betrayal. A profound, broken trust from someone who feels genuinely misled by a commander-in-chief he had supported.
He doesn't hold back.
He pulls no punches whatsoever, and his words carry the weight of, maybe, a disillusioned insider.
So what is his core accusation? What's he saying happened?
His core accusation against Donald Trump is, It's scathing, it's direct, it cuts right to the heart of what he sees as a deliberate deception.
Okay.
He states unequivocally that Trump is not just a disappointment. He's a disgrace as an American leader, and as a human being.
Wow. That's strong language. That's not political disagreement.
No, this is an indictment, born, it seems, from a profound sense of personal betrayal. And Ritter goes further. He asserts that Trump is a straight-up liar who can never again be trusted and never should again be given the benefit of the doubt.
A straight-up liar. Why? What's the basis for that specific charge?
This condemnation, it stems from Ritter's belief, his assertion, that Trump deliberately orchestrated a deceptive plan, using the guise of that 2-week window for diplomacy.
The one where strikes were still happening.
Exactly, using that window to essentially lull Iran into a false sense of security.
Okay, and to what end? What was the goal of this alleged deception, according to Ritter?
The intention, in Ritter's view, was to create an opening for Israel to launch a catastrophic Pearl Harbor-style surprise attack on Iranian targets, catching them off guard under the pretense of this diplomatic pause.
A Pearl Harbor-style attack. That's a very loaded term.
Extremely loaded. And Ritter elaborates on his view of Trump's character to explain why he thinks this happened. He describes him as a coward and a morally weak man.
A coward.
Yes. Ritter claims Trump gets led around and influenced by people, that he doesn't stand for anything and doesn't have a core of steel.
So the argument is he's easily swayed.
The essence of Ritter's critique is that Trump is fundamentally unable to deliver peace because he can't stand up to people when they stand up to him. He believes Trump allowed himself to be swayed by external pressures, in this case, presumably from Israel or voices supporting that line, rather than upholding his own promises.
The promise of peace and non-intervention.
Exactly. And this deeply personal indictment, remember, it's coming from a former Marine who says he backed Trump specifically because of that peace platform. It's more than just commentary, it's a profound accusation of duplicity.
Which, in Ritter's view, shatters any pretense of non-intervention.
Completely. And in Ritter's stark assessment, it implicates Trump as complicit in actions that he argues could be construed as those of a war criminal.
He uses that term, war criminal.
He does, leading Ritter to the chilling conclusion that, in this, we have just become that which we condemn. A profound sense of moral failing.
That is quite an accusation, a betrayal not just of a political promise, but of a core American value in his eyes.
Precisely.
Now, if Ritter's accusations paint this picture of betrayal, maybe deception, from the U.S. side, or at least from Trump, what about the Israeli leadership? What are their declared intentions? Because that seems crucial here too.
Absolutely. And they reveal an arguably even more aggressive underlying agenda, which certainly puts Ritter's accusations into a starker relief.
How so?
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been strikingly explicit, public, about his objective to target Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
Targeting the supreme leader himself.
Yes, he has stated, for the record, that no one in Iran should have immunity. And even more chillingly, that Khamenei cannot be allowed to continue to exist.
Cannot be allowed to exist. That's unambiguous.
Extremely. Netanyahu has even gone so far as to assert that assassinating Khamenei would, quote, put an end to the conflict.
That seems overly simplistic for such a complex, deeply rooted conflict.
One might think so, but it's the view he's publicly stated. And here's the kicker, perhaps. He claims the only reason he hasn't ordered this assassination already is because Donald Trump disagreed with that plan.
Okay, wait, so Netanyahu says Trump disagreed with assassinating Khamenei, but Ritter is accusing Trump of being a liar and a coward who gets led around and secretly facilitated a major attack during a supposed diplomatic window.
Exactly. You put Netanyahu's public statements right next to Ritter's accusations. And a deeply uncomfortable question just hangs there, doesn't it?
It really does. Was Trump's public stance of peace, or this claimed disagreement with Netanyahu's plan, was that a genuine attempt at de-escalation?
Or was it, as Ritter implies, part of something more complex? Maybe a deceptive geopolitical strategy, designed to facilitate Israeli actions while maintaining this facade of non-intervention.
The accusation seems to be that Trump allowed Israel to pursue an attack plan, or at least major strikes that he perhaps publicly disapproved of or claimed to.
And that right there would be the profound betrayal of those campaign promises, a betrayal of that specific segment of his electorate, the veterans, the anti-war advocates who trusted him on this very issue.
It suggests a calculated deception, where a political promise becomes a strategic smokescreen for military escalation.
That's the core of Ritter's charge.
Okay, let's shift then. From the political maneuvering, the accusations of betrayal, to the raw reality on the ground. What does this conflict actually look like right now?
It's characterized by relentless military actions, with dire, immediate impacts on both sides. Israel has been on a sustained offensive, striking dozens of military targets across Iran.
And these aren't just random hits.
No, they appear strategic. Reports mention critical infrastructure like missile production sites, and significantly, even the heavily guarded headquarters of Iran's SBND nuclear research facility in Tehran.
Striking a nuclear research facility headquarters, that signals a clear intent, doesn't it? To degrade Iran's military and potentially its nuclear capability.
It certainly seems that way. And Iran's response, it's been immediate and fierce, a clear demonstration of their retaliatory capacity.
What form has that taken?
We've seen fresh barrages of missiles fired towards northern, central, and southern Israel. Across major Israeli cities, Tel Aviv, Haifa sirens have been constantly blaring. Hundreds of thousands forced into shelters, daily life completely disrupted.
And are these missiles getting through? We hear so much about Iron Dome.
That's what's particularly concerning and maybe a significant shift in the dynamics. Reports indicate Iran's missiles have managed several times to pierce Israel's vaunted Iron Dome defense system.
Piercing Iron Dome, how?
We'll get into the how in a moment, but the what is that they're hitting civilian neighborhoods, hospitals, even a research institute. This isn't just unfortunate collateral damage. It seems to reveal a strategic vulnerability that many thought was almost impenetrable.
So this isn't some theoretical conflict debated in distant halls.
Not at all.
It's a brutal reality playing out in real time with immediate devastating consequences for civilians on both sides.
Yes, and the human toll, as revealed by the sources we've looked at, it's grim.
What are the numbers?
The reported figures are stark. 240 Iranians and 24 Israelis killed.
240 Iranians, 24 Israelis.
But beyond the statistics, there are these deeply tragic human stories that really bring the horror into sharp focus.
Like what?
Consider the heart-wrenching case of Nastia Borik, a 7-year-old Ukrainian girl. She had leukemia.
Oh no.
She and her family, her mother, grandmother, 2 cousins, they fled the brutality of war-torn Ukraine. They came to Israel seeking life-saving medical treatment, seeking safety.
They fled one war zone for another, hoping for refuge.
Exactly. Instead, they were killed by an Iranian airstrike in Bat Yam, a city just south of Tel Aviv.
The whole family.
The girl, her mother, grandmother, 2 cousins, and her father. He's still serving on the Ukrainian front lines, fighting a different war, likely unaware, at least initially, of the unimaginable tragedy that's befallen his family so far away.
That's just devastating.
Israeli President Isaac Herzog summed it up perfectly, didn't he? He said, "She came seeking life, instead she was murdered." It encapsulates the senselessness.
It truly does. Are there other impacts on civilian infrastructure, hospitals, for instance?
Yes. Iran's Red Crescent reported that 5 Iranian hospitals suffered damage from Israeli strikes. And similarly, Israel's Soroka Medical Center was also hit by an Iranian missile.
Hospitals on both sides being hit.
Which raises serious concerns, doesn't it, about potential violations of international humanitarian law. It underscores the often indiscriminate nature of modern conflict, especially when things escalate like this, when perhaps red lines get blurred or crossed.
And this brings us back to Scott Ritter's assessment of Israel's defenses, right? You mentioned he had a critical view.
It becomes even more sobering in this context. He states plainly that Israel cannot defend itself effectively and thoroughly on its own, even with the full capacity, he argues, of the United States military and its allies.
That challenges a lot of long-held assumptions about Israeli military prowess and self-sufficiency.
It absolutely does. And Ritter's analysis offers a critical explanation for why Iranian missiles seem to be managing to strike targets on the ground in Israel with this increasing regularity, piercing the Iron Dome.
So how does he explain it? How did they pierce the dome?
He argues that the Iranians have effectively broken the code by saturating this air defense system.
Saturating it? You mean overwhelming it with number?
Precisely. Overwhelming the Iron Dome with a sheer volume of incoming projectiles. Often these might be less sophisticated, cheaper rockets or drones. The goal is to force the system to expend its highly expensive interceptor missiles at a rate it simply cannot sustain.
They run out of interceptors, basically.
Or the system gets overwhelmed tracking too many targets. Once the air defense system is degraded, saturated, its interceptors depleted, Ritter explains, then the Iranians hit various nodes, command and control nodes, the missile nodes, with more precise, strategically targeted munitions.
So it's a 2-punch strategy. First overwhelm, then strike precisely through the gaps created.
That seems to be the analysis. This strategic approach effectively creates openings, allowing their missiles to bypass the vaunted defense and strike critical targets.
What's striking here, then, is that even with incredibly advanced defense systems like Iron Dome,
The sheer volume and, frankly, the strategic cunning of these attacks are proving incredibly difficult to contain. It leads to this grim reality for civilians on both sides, and it forces a profound reevaluation of modern air defense strategies.
it's a stark indicator that maybe no defense system, no matter how advanced, is truly impenetrable when faced with overwhelming force and strategic ingenuity.
That seems to be the lesson emerging.
And as the bombs fall, as the human cost mounts, this isn't just staying between Israel and Iran, is it? It's broadening.
Absolutely. It's triggering escalating regional repercussions, and it's forging some unexpected and potentially very powerful alliances.
What's the most significant development there?
Arguably the unprecedented public intervention of Ayatollah Ali Sistani.
Iraq's highest Shiite religious authority. Hugely influential figure.
Immensely influential, possibly the most revered living Shiite cleric globally. He publicly warned that if the US or Israel were to touch Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei,
If they were to harm Khamenei,
nobody will be able to contain the fallout.
nobody will be able to contain it. That's a very direct warning from someone like Sistani.
It's profound because it signals potentially a new coalition between Iraq and Iran, something unseen in over 40 years. It's almost like uniting, as one source put it, water and oil,
Two nations with very complex, often antagonistic histories.
now seemingly bound by a shared existential red line concerning their religious leadership. And Sistani's warning was explicit, chilling. He declared he no longer would contain Iraqi Shiite militias.
Which are powerful, well-armed forces in their own right.
Highly motivated, yes. And Sistani used the key word chaos to describe the coming devastation. It implies a deliberate unleashing of forces that perhaps have been held somewhat in check by his spiritual authority until now.
Imagine the power of a figure like that, essentially giving a green light, or at least removing the red light, for uncontainable retaliation.
The implications are staggering, and the public reaction across the region was immediate, visceral.
Protests.
Thousands of Iraqis, spurred on by another powerful cleric, Muqtada al-Sadr, took to the streets in Baghdad, in Najaf, protesting the conflict, accusing Israel of seeking to dominate the Middle East.
So not just Sistani, but Sadr mobilizing people too.
Yes, and widespread Iranian protests against Israel, against Western influence. Demonstrators waving Hezbollah flags, chanting anti-Western slogans. It shows this isn't just state-on-state anymore.
It's igniting these deeply embedded religious, historical, anti-imperialist sentiments across the whole region.
Unifying unexpected forces, expanding the conflict far beyond just military targets.
And if all that isn't enough to underscore the global implications, there's the economic threat.
Strait of Hormuz.
Exactly. An Iran-backed Shiite militia in Iraq has explicitly threatened to shut down the Strait of Hormuz.
And for anyone listening who isn't familiar, this is arguably the most critical choke point for global energy.
What kind of volume are we talking?
Roughly 20% of the world's daily oil passes through that narrow strait, plus a huge amount of liquefied natural gas.
20%. So if that were choked off.
The consequences would be nothing short of catastrophic for the global economy.
Explain that. What would happen?
An immediate, dramatic surge in energy prices. Crude oil could go well beyond historic highs. That triggers rampant inflation across all sectors. Global supply chains, already fragile,
They'd seize up.
leading to shortages of critical goods. Industries reliant on cheap energy could face collapse. Widespread unemployment, potentially a global recession, maybe even depression.
This isn't just a regional squabble then.
Not even close. It's a direct threat to the financial stability, the everyday lives of billions worldwide. This conflict isn't just spreading geographically, it's triggering these deep-seated historical religious responses, unifying these forces, and threatening global economic stability in ways we really haven't seen in decades. It feels like it's pushing the world ever closer to an unprecedented crisis.
Which brings us squarely to Ayatollah Khamenei himself.
Yes, this escalating tension leads directly to understanding the profound cultural, religious, political significance of Iran's supreme leader.
Why is any threat to his life such an existential red line for so many?
It's absolutely critical to grasp this. For millions of Shiite Muslims globally, Khamenei isn't just a head of state, a political figurehead. He's a supreme spiritual leader.
Akin to the Pope in Catholicism, perhaps.
That's a useful analogy, yes.
Yeah.
His authority, his sanctity are deeply intertwined with the theological structure. the very identity of their faith. An attack on him is perceived as an attack on the spiritual heart of their belief system.
Which explains Ayatollah Sistani's warning.
Precisely. Why Sistani called eliminating Khamenei a political crime that would ignite an uncontainable fire across the entire Shiite world. Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Pakistan, beyond.
Is there historical precedent for this level of protection around a leader?
There is. You can look back to 1963. The Shah of Iran attempted to execute Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, the figure who later led the Islamic Revolution.
What happened?
Despite being condemned to death, facing immense political pressure, the attempt failed, primarily because of Khomeini's insurmountable religious status. Killing him would have incurred a spiritual and political cost that was just too high, too destabilizing, even for the Shah's regime.
So he was exiled instead.
Exactly. And this precedent, it underscores the sacredness of the leader's life in Shiite memory. It established a kind of historical red line that has held for decades.
So what's truly profound here is understanding this isn't just about political assassination.
No. It's seen as an attack on the spiritual core of an entire faith. And that has implications stretching far beyond conventional warfare, risking a potentially cataclysmic religion-fueled conflict.
And it's this sacred spiritual red line that connects directly to the nuclear dimension.
Terrifyingly, yes.
We're moving beyond conventional warfare here. We're talking about a potential nuclear exchange with unimaginable global repercussions, threatening life as we know it, frankly.
It sounds like hyperbole, but the warnings are explicit.
What warning?
We have received a chilling warning from Pakistan, a nuclear-armed state, a nation with a significant Shiite population.
What did Pakistan say?
They explicitly stated that if Israel were to launch a nuclear attack on Iran, or even cause a nuclear disaster over Iran, say, by striking a nuclear facility,
Then what?
Pakistan would, without hesitation, use its own nuclear warheads against Israel.
Let that sink in. Pakistan threatening nuclear retaliation against Israel if Israel uses nukes or causes a nuclear disaster in Iran.
It takes this conflict from a regional crisis, however devastating, to a truly global existential threat. A horrifying scenario where the unthinkable suddenly becomes a very real possibility.
And this terrifying prospect, it wasn't just theoretical recently, was it? There was the Bushehr incident.
Yes, that brought this into stark focus. And it immediately revealed the profound impact of Russia's involvement and its own nuclear red lines.
What happened at Bushehr?
Initially, an Israeli military spokesperson claimed a successful strike on the Bushehr nuclear power plant.
And Bushehr is significant because
It's Iran's only working nuclear power plant, a 1,000 megawatt facility. Crucially, it wasn't built by Iran alone, it was built by Russia's state nuclear energy corporation, Rosneft.
so Russian technology, Russian involvement.
And critically, at the time of this alleged strike, there were still some 200 Russian scientists operating on site, overseeing its operations, its maintenance.
Russian personnel on site at a nuclear plant allegedly hit by Israel. How did Russia react?
Furiously and immediately. Maria Zakharova, the Kremlin spokesperson, issued a public, unequivocal warning directly to Washington.
To the U.S.?
Yes, warning Washington against military intervention in this situation, stating in no uncertain terms that any U.S. military action would be an extremely dangerous step with truly unpredictable negative consequences.
Strong words, but general. Did they get specific about Bushehr?
They did, and this is where it got really chilling. Russia issued a specific threat directly linked to Bushehr. If that plant were to explode as a result of an attack, it would result in a Chernobyl-level disaster.
They actually used the word Chernobyl.
Explicitly, a deliberate, calculated reference to the 1986 catastrophic nuclear accident in Ukraine, the one that rendered vast areas uninhabitable, caused widespread long-term health effects, thousands of cancer deaths, left a permanent scar on the global psyche.
The message couldn't be clearer.
Attack Bushehr, and you risk a global catastrophe, and you are directly attacking Russian interests and personnel.
What was the immediate effect of that specific, stark warning?
It was telling. Following Russia's direct threat concerning a Russian-built facility with Russian personnel, Israel swiftly retracted its claim.
They walked it back.
By evening, yes, their official statement became that the initial report was a mistake and that nothing happened to the plant.
Wow. So the retraction was almost immediate after the Chernobyl warning.
It raises an important question, doesn't it? This rapid reversal suggests that even in this incredibly volatile situation, certain red lines, especially those involving global nuclear risks and the direct endangerment of another major power's citizens and assets, are still understood.
And for now, at least, respected.
It implies that despite the intensity, there are still boundaries, terrifyingly close to the brink, that even the most determined actors are currently unwilling to cross. It highlights this precarious, dangerous balance of power.
Which brings us back to Iran's nuclear program itself, and the wider implications for, global non-proliferation efforts.
It's a crucial piece of the puzzle. Iran has consistently denied developing nuclear weapons. Consistently. Despite Israel's equally persistent accusations that their program is military, that it's a direct existential threat.
And the intelligence seems conflicted, doesn't it?
Deeply. It's fascinating and troubling. You have the US CIA indicating Iran doesn't currently have enough highly enriched uranium for a bomb.
Okay.
Yet at the same time, Israel claims Iran possesses enough fissile material for 9 nuclear weapons.
9. That's a massive discrepancy. How can both be true or believe?
It fuels what can only be described as a narrative war. It makes it incredibly difficult for the international community to discern the truth, to formulate coherent policy. Who do you believe? What are the consequences of getting it wrong?
And adding another volatile layer, Iran's threat regarding the MP2.
Yes, Iran has overtly threatened to withdraw from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty if these attacks on its territory continue.
And the NPT is.
It's the cornerstone of global efforts to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons. Iran pulling out would be a huge blow, and it would immediately draw parallels to Israel's own situation.
Israel's unacknowledged nuclear arsenal and the fact they aren't part of the NPT.
Exactly. A fact that deeply irritates many nations. So what does this all mean for the global stage? It's deeply worrying.
It feels like the very efforts to prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons
Might perversely be pushing them closer to developing them as a perceived means of deterrence against foreign aggression.
which could destabilize the entire global non-proliferation regime, setting a dangerous precedent for other nations.
That's the fear, dramatically increasing the risk of nuclear proliferation worldwide. It's a high-stakes gamble with global security where, as you said, the cure might end up being worse than the disease.
So amidst all this brinkmanship, these nuclear fears, what about diplomacy? Are powers trying to pull things back?
Yes, as this conflict rages, the global chessboard is definitely buzzing with, well, desperate attempts by international powers to de-escalate, to pull back from the edge of this potential catastrophe.
Where are these calls coming from?
Widespread calls from major European leaders, France, Germany, the UK. The UK's foreign minister explicitly stated that a window now exists for a diplomatic solution. There's this urgent hope for a pause.
A window, echoing Trump's phrase, ironically.
Indeed, and the desperation seems so profound that even the UK Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, made a direct, quite extraordinary appeal to Donald Trump.
Appealing to Trump. On what grounds?
To pursue peace, even suggesting it could be his path to a Nobel Peace Prize, a clear attempt to appeal to maybe a potential future leader's sense of legacy.
Trying any angle possible, it seems.
And this sentiment is echoed by a collective of 9 EU countries, all urgently advocating for de-escalation, for a negotiated resolution, recognizing the massive regional and global risks.
Are regional powers also voicing concern?
Yes. The Saudi nuclear regulator issued a stark warning that attacks on peaceful nuclear facilities violate international law. That reflects widespread regional anxieties, not just about the immediate conflict, but about the terrifying prospect of environmental contamination, nuclear fallout, broader reprisal attacks across the already volatile Middle East.
So the world is basically watching, holding its breath.
Diplomatic channels are buzzing even as the bombs keep falling, everyone desperately hoping to pull back from the brink before it's truly too late.
Okay, let's analyze the U.S. position in all this. Its internal contradictions, maybe, and the limitations of its current strategy, especially through those critical expert eyes like Ritter's.
Right. Despite Trump's declared 2-week window for diplomacy, we see reports that U.S. officials remain openly skeptical of Iran's willingness to negotiate.
And why is that?
Well, the skepticism isn't unfounded, perhaps, because Iran's consistent message has been unequivocal. No talks with the U.S. until Israeli aggression ceases. And they point out quite directly that the U.S. has so far not pressured Israel to halt its strikes.
Which creates this almost unbreakable diplomatic deadlock. One side demands a halt to military action for talks. The other continues those actions, seemingly without U.S. restraint.
It's a catch-22. And adding to this complexity, you have Scott Ritter's stark assessment of the actual U.S. military options, particularly concerning Iran's deeply buried Fordo nuclear site.
The one they'd need to hit to really degrade the nuclear program potential. What does Ritter say about that?
He discusses the much-touted GBU-57 bunker-buster bomb. It's huge, 30,000 pounds, deployed via stealth PD-4 bombers from remote bases like Diego Garcia.
Sounds formidable.
But Ritter argues it's simply not going to accomplish the mission at Fordo.
Why not?
He explains that while the bomb theoretically penetrates 50-60 meters underground, the Fordo bunker is believed to be at least 80-90 meters deep.
So it just can't reach it.
That's his technical assessment. Furthermore, he notes that this very bomb didn't work, failed to achieve its objectives in 2 previous uses against deeply buried targets in Yemen last year.
Suggesting a proven limitation, not just a theoretical one.
Right, which raises this crucial, difficult question. With the seemingly ineffective conventional military solutions for key targets, and this profound lack of diplomatic leverage over its ally, is the U.S. inadvertently committing itself to a problem for which it no longer has a conventional solution?
Forcing it into an impossible choice between unacceptable military escalation, potentially nuclear, or a perceived diplomatic failure or surrender.
That seems to be the potential bind. And in stark contrast to this U.S. predicament, you see China and Russia presenting this remarkably united front.
How are they positioning themselves?
As voices of reason, of stability, both nations strongly condemned Israel's actions, unequivocally calling them breaches of international law.
That's significant, isn't it? Especially after early G7 statements were more critical of Iran.
It's a huge diplomatic win for Iran, yes.
Yeah.
And this shift is profound. It reveals a realignment, perhaps, of global powers. Major players like China and Russia openly urging de-escalation, effectively sending a powerful, maybe veiled message to Trump. Cool the situation, don't escalate it.
So this growing international consensus against the Israeli strikes, driven by China and Russia, could actually influence the trajectory.
It could, potentially pressuring the U.S. to reconsider its stance or risk further international isolation on this issue.
So as we draw towards the end of this analysis, it seems crucial to return to that unwavering resolve of the Israeli leadership and the stark choice that still seems to face the U.S.
Despite everything, the international pressure, the horrific human toll, the terrifying prospect of nuclear war,
Benjamin Netanyahu's position remains absolutely clear, unyielding. When Khamenei is alive, nobody is safe.
it shows an absolute determination to exact a complete price from Iran for every attack, implying Israel's mission won't be deterred regardless of Trump's ultimate decision on intervention. It feels almost existential, beyond normal political calculation.
There was even that surprising anecdote you mentioned about the Tel Aviv stock exchange.
Right, highlighting this internal Israeli resolve. When Iran attacked the stock exchange, instead of a market crash, the Israeli market actually rose, attributed to a strong surge of nationalistic sentiment, signaling this internal determination, this resilience that maybe goes beyond economic fear or rational market logic.
And what's more, Israel is openly stating its expectation
That the U.S. will decide to join the war in the next 24 to 48 hours, according to some reports at the time, placing immense, almost unbearable pressure on Trump to make a definitive move.
So what does this all mean for you, listening, for the world? It feels like the conflict just keeps hurtling forward, driven by these deep-seated objectives, this profound national resolve on all sides.
While the world holds its breath, waiting for that definitive move that could either somehow usher in peace or plunge us all into an unprecedented global catastrophe.
The stakes, it feels safe to say, truly could not be higher. Every moment seems to push us closer to that brink.
It's a deeply precarious moment.
Okay, we've reached the end of this deep dive, and it has been, well, a tumultuous journey. Through escalating tensions, accusations of profound betrayal, truly chilling warnings.
We've tried to uncover the critical layers of this conflict between Israel and Iran.
Framed significantly through Scott Ritter's powerful, almost visceral condemnation of Trump, calling him a liar, a coward, a disgrace, all stemming from Ritter's perceived personal betrayal over those peace promises.
Which leads Ritter to that stark conclusion, implicating Trump in his view as a war criminal for allegedly facilitating that Pearl Harbor-style attack under false diplomatic pretenses.
We've also highlighted the profound significance of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's life, understanding why any threat to him is this existential red line, capable of igniting Sistani's worn, uncontainable fire across the Shiite world.
And we examine those direct nuclear threats, from Pakistan threatening retaliation, from Russia with the Chernobyl warning over Bushehr, threats which force that crucial, albeit maybe temporary, de-escalation, reminding us just how terrifyingly close we came.
We also explored the limited yet incredibly dangerous options that seem to remain for a world desperately seeking peace, and the complex web of alliances, antagonisms that define this incredibly fraught moment.
We've really witnessed, haven't we, how a single conflict can so quickly draw in global powers, trigger these ancient warnings, bring us to the very edge of nuclear confrontation.
All while this powerful voice of conscience, Scott Ritter, cries foul over broken trust, perceived deception, demanding accountability from those in power.
It leaves us with a lot to consider.
It really does. Which brings us to our final thought for you today. In an age where information is just overwhelming, it's abundant, but clarity feels increasingly scarce.
And the lines between strategic messaging, personal conviction, and frankly outright deception seem increasingly blurred.
How do we, as global citizens, how do you truly discern leadership that guides us towards safety? From leadership that might, perhaps inadvertently, perhaps not, lead us straight into the abyss?
It's a heavy question.
It is, and it's one that demands our constant vigilance, our critical thought, and maybe our deepest reflection, especially now.